the love story of Ruth and Boaz complete, a biblical journey of faith and redemption. In the shadow of ancient Judah's rolling hills, during the chaotic days of the Judges, a story unfolds that radiates hope, fidelity, and the quiet orchestration of God's hand. The tale of Ruth and Boaz found in the book of Ruth is far more than a tender love story. It is a profound narrative of covenant loyalty, divine redemption, and the inclusion of outsiders into God's eternal plan. Set against a backdrop of famine, loss, and cultural divides, this account captures the heart with its portrayal of ordinary people whose faith and kindness ripple through history, leading to the lineage of King David and ultimately the Messiah. With every step of Ruth's journey and Boaz's righteousness, we see God's providence weaving a tapestry of grace, proving that no one is beyond his reach and no moment is outside his purpose. This story invites us to witness how acts of loyalty and obedience rooted in trust can transform lives and fulfill divine promises. The events of Ruth unfold during the period of the Judges, circa 1200–1020 BCE, a time of spiritual and political turmoil in Israel. The final verse of Judges encapsulates the era. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. Judges 21:25. Famine, a recurring challenge in the ancient Near East, often drove families to desperate measures, as seen when Elimelech's family left Bethlehem for Moab. Bethlehem, meaning house of bread, was ironically struck by scarcity, reflecting the broader instability of the time. Moab, Israel's eastern neighbor, was a land of cultural and religious tension. Descended from Lot, Genesis 19:37, Moabites worshipped Chemosh, a deity associated with human sacrifice, 2 Kings 3:27, and their history with Israel included hostility, such as Balak's attempt to curse them, Numbers 22:24. Moabites were often viewed with suspicion, and intermarriage was discouraged, Deuteronomy 23:3–6, making Ruth's inclusion in Israel's story remarkable. Central to the narrative are two Mosaic institutions, levirate marriage and the kinsman redeemer, Goel. Levirate marriage, Deuteronomy 25:5–10, ensured a widow's security and the continuation of a family line by having a relative marry her to produce an heir. The kinsman redeemer, Leviticus 25:25–28, could redeem lost family land or provide for destitute relatives, preserving inheritance and social stability. These practices, rooted in Israel's covenant with God, were acts of hesed, covenant loyalty and steadfast love, reflecting God's care for his people. In a lawless era, adherence to these customs was a testament to faith, and Boaz's actions exemplify this righteousness. The story also reflects the agricultural rhythms of ancient Israel. Gleaning, permitted under the law, Leviticus 19:9–10, allowed the poor to collect leftover crops, a provision for widows and foreigners like Ruth. The barley harvest, during which the story is set, coincided with spring around Passover, symbolizing renewal and aligning with the narrative's themes of restoration. The threshing floor, where Ruth approaches Boaz, was a communal hub, but nighttime encounters there carried social risks, highlighting Ruth's boldness and Boaz's integrity. Elimelech, a man of Bethlehem in Judah, faced a dire famine that threatened his family's survival. With his wife Naomi and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, he sought refuge in Moab, a land of rolling plateaus beyond the Dead Sea. In this foreign land, tragedy struck swiftly. Elimelech died, leaving Naomi a widow. Her sons married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, forging bonds across cultural divides. Yet after 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion died, plunging Naomi into grief and economic peril. Widows in ancient Israel were among the most vulnerable, reliant on family or charity for survival. Hearing that God had visited his people by restoring food to Bethlehem, Ruth 1:6, Naomi resolved to return home, urging her daughters-in-law to remain in Moab, where they might remarry and rebuild their lives. Orpah, weeping, kissed Naomi goodbye and stayed, a choice rooted in practicality. But Ruth's response was extraordinary. Clinging to Naomi, she declared, "Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Ruth 1:16-17. This oath was not mere sentiment, it was a radical commitment, renouncing her Moabite identity and embracing Israel's God, Yahweh, despite the risks of poverty and prejudice as a foreigner. Ruth's loyalty, rooted in love for Naomi and faith in God, set the stage for divine providence to unfold. In Bethlehem, Naomi and Ruth faced a precarious existence. Naomi, once known as pleasant, now called herself Mara, meaning bitter, lamenting, "I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty." Ruth 1:20-21. Ruth, undeterred, took initiative to provide for them. She ventured to glean in the fields, a humble and labor-intensive task reserved for the poor. Mosaic law required landowners to leave edges of their fields unharvested and allow gleaners to collect fallen grain. Leviticus 23:22, a provision reflecting God's concern for the marginalized. By divine coincidence, or as the text hints, God's unseen guidance, Ruth gleaned in the fields of Boaz, a wealthy and honorable kinsman of Elimelech. Ruth 2:3. Boaz, arriving to oversee his harvest, noticed Ruth's diligent work and inquired about her. His workers reported her tireless effort and her story of loyalty to Naomi. Moved by her character, Boaz approached Ruth, saying, "Stay here with my servant girls. Let no one harm you, and drink from the water my men have drawn." Ruth 2:8-9. He instructed his workers to leave extra grain for her and invited her to share their meals, acts of kindness that exceeded legal obligations. Ruth, humbled, responded, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" Ruth 2:10. Her gratitude and humility shone, reflecting a heart shaped by faith and resilience. Boaz, described as a man of standing, Ruth 2:1, stood out in an era marked by moral decay. His adherence to the law and his generosity reflected a deep fear of God. He blessed Ruth, saying, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Ruth 2:12. This imagery of God's wings evokes the protective cherubim over the Ark of the Covenant, symbolizing divine shelter. Boaz's actions, ensuring Ruth's safety, providing extra grain, and treating her with dignity, demonstrated hesed, a covenant love that mirrored God's faithfulness. Naomi, recognizing Boaz's kindness, saw hope for redemption. She instructed Ruth to approach Boaz at the threshing floor, a bold plan rooted in the kinsman-redeemer custom, Ruth 3:1-4. At night, after the harvest work, Ruth uncovered Boaz's feet and lay down, a symbolic act requesting protection and marriage, Ruth 3:7-9. This was a culturally delicate moment. The threshing floor, while a place of communal labor, was not typically a setting for such encounters, and misinterpretation could tarnish Ruth's reputation. Yet Ruth trusted Naomi's wisdom and God's guidance. Boaz, waking to find her, responded with integrity, praising her character. "This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after younger men, whether rich or poor." Ruth 3:10. He assured her he would act as her redeemer, provided a closer kinsman declined. Boaz, with legal precision, convened a meeting at Bethlehem's city gate, the hub for public transactions, Ruth 4:1-2. He summoned the nearer kinsman and 10 elders as witnesses, presenting the opportunity to redeem Elimelech's land and marry Ruth to preserve the family line. The kinsman initially agreed, but declined when he realized marrying Ruth would complicate his own inheritance, Ruth 4:5-6. This refusal cleared the way for Boaz, who willingly accepted the role of Goel. With the elders' approval, he redeemed the land and married Ruth, a public act sealed with communal blessing. "May the Lord make the woman entering your home like Rachel and Leah, who built the house of Israel." Ruth 4:11. Ruth and Boaz's marriage bore fruit in the birth of Obed, who became the father of Jesse and grandfather of King David. Ruth 4:17. Naomi, once desolate, cradled her grandson. Her emptiness transformed into joy. The women of Bethlehem praised God, saying, "He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age." Ruth 4:15. Ruth, the Moabite outsider, became a matriarch in Israel's history, her name later honored in the genealogy of Jesus, Matthew 1:5. Character analysis. Ruth, her loyalty, humility, and courage define her legacy. As a Moabite widow, she faced social and economic vulnerability, yet chose to bind herself to Naomi and Yahweh. Her declaration, Ruth 1:16-17, reflects a conversion of heart, embracing Israel's God. Her diligence in gleaning and boldness at the threshing floor show faith-driven initiative, making her a model of trust and resilience. Boaz, a beacon of righteousness, Boaz's generosity and adherence to the law contrast with the era's chaos. His protection of Ruth, a foreigner, and his willingness to redeem her reflect, he said, and foreshadow Christ's redemptive work. His integrity at the threshing floor and city gate highlights his commitment to God's justice. Naomi, her arc from bitterness to hope, mirrors God's restorative power. Her strategic guidance to Ruth, Ruth 3:1-4, reflects wisdom and trust in God's covenant promises, despite her initial despair. Her joy in Obed's birth completes her redemption. Key lessons. Covenant loyalty, he said. Ruth's devotion to Naomi and Boaz, as kindness to both women, exemplify Hesed, showing that faithful love, rooted in God, brings blessing. God's inclusive grace. Ruth's transformation from a Moabite outsider to a forebear of the Messiah reveals God's plan to include all nations in his redemption. Isaiah 56:3-7. Redemption's power. Boaz's role as Goel points to Christ, who redeems humanity through sacrificial love, restoring what was lost. Divine providence. The chance of Ruth gleaning in Boaz's field. Ruth 2:3, and the timing of events reveal God's sovereign hand, orchestrating human lives for his purposes. Character over circumstance. Ruth's humility and Boaz's righteousness show that godly character shines in adversity, shaping history through ordinary acts. The story of Ruth and Boaz is a masterpiece of divine storytelling, where loyalty, faith, and kindness triumph over loss and division. In an era of chaos, their lives testify to God's faithfulness, weaving a Moabite widow and an Israelite redeemer into the lineage of Christ. This narrative challenges us to trust God's timing, act with courage, and extend grace to others, knowing that He works through every faithful step to fulfill His redemptive plan. If this story resonates with you, share it to inspire others, and stay tuned for more tales of God's work in human hearts.